Hey everybody, what's up? Aaron here, Question Period Canada. How's your day going? I've been a busy little beaver today. Yes, I have, a hardworking Canadian boy. We're releasing, or what we're doing right now is a live Canadian Senate from today, so it should be really interesting. We did the earlier question period from the Commons. We also released a highlight video of that, so please check that out. I'm Aaron, like and subscribe to the channel. We're having fun here with Canadian politics. Let's get ready and jump right into question period. Should be interesting because there's been a lot going on in Canadian politics recently.
Question period. Période de questions. Senator Platt.
Here we go. Question period.
Thank you,
Senator
Speaker.
Platt's up first.
Leader, last week, Premier Doug Ford sent an open letter to all honourable senators who represent the province of Ontario in this chamber. Premier Ford asked Ontario senators to pass Bill C-234 without delay to remove the Trudeau carbon tax for farmers. He's not the only Premier to do so, Leader. Premier Houston implored Nova Scotia senators to pass this bill in its original form. Premier Higgs of New Brunswick asked all Atlantic senators to pass the bill as it was passed in the House. Leader, the Trudeau government has been scurrying behind the scenes to convince senators to shut down Bill C-234. Has Minister Guilbeault or any other Trudeau government representative spoken with the new senators sworn in earlier today about Bill C-234?
We got some new senators.
Senator Gold.
Well, thank you for your question and for reminding us that this bill is still before us for debate. I believe that we will continue the debate on Senator Motion's amendment later today. I know that many speakers are interested in participating and contributing to the debate. That's the democratic process. It's a democratic process it is part of the democratic process for premiers to make their views known and to speak to senators. And indeed, that's part of the politics that we practice in a democratic society. I look forward to the further debate on this matter.
Kind of a non-answer.
Senator Gold.
Senator Gordy said it's silly season at this time. It's starting at the government level. I asked you a question, answer it. Farmers have gathered on Parliament Hill today to make their voices heard on C-234. Answer them. They are struggling under the weight of the carbon tax. They are asking for a carbon tax carve-out to help produce the food we eat, you and I. Senator Gold, did you or your government office pressure, talk to, or whip the 5 new senators when it comes to voting on C-234? Not debate, vote on.
Senator Gold.
He's heated up.
Well, as honourable senators would know, at best, I can count on the votes of my 2 colleagues here. We do not have either the ability nor the desire to put pressure on nor whip senators. I respect each and every senator in this place to come to their decision after they have been properly and to the extent that they wish to participate in this debate.
I can't believe he just said that. That you don't try to influence other senators.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I don't agree with that.
The question is for the government leader in the Senate.
That's crazy.
Mr. Leader, a few weeks ago we learned that your government intends to replace the CP 540 Atlantic jets without going through a tender and without ensuring that Canadian companies can bid. How did your government decide to take this approach, which will favor the American firm Boeing? Leader, how do you explain this to Canadian workers?
Claude looks just
Senator
like
Gold.
Andy Serkis, like Golem,
the government
character.
of Canada and all governments have great respect for this very important industry, the aviation industry in Canada. A final decision by the government has not been taken, and the government of Canada has already very clearly indicated that the important thing in any decision that will be made is to ensure that it is beneficial to the Canadian economy and to ensure that our defense system is properly protected in purchasing aircraft. Senator Carignan, Mr. Leader, your government is a very unique one.
It's got a funny way of talking.
Because this approach is not usually used, and if it is, it's usually used to the benefit of Canadian companies and not foreign companies. We learned through testimony in the last few days by high-ranking government officials that Avazen, an American consulting firm, was involved in this decision, which will benefit Boeing. Can you comment on that? Senator Gold, it is not ridiculous for the Government of Canada to put the emphasis on how to ensure
Short and
that
sweet
Canadians are
answer
better
there.
protected.
Gold is
Senator Miville-Deschênes.
seems like he's in a mood today.
Senator
Dodging
Gold.
answers harder than normal.
The Quebec National Assembly recently adopted a motion asking the owners of platforms like YouTube and Spotify to adjust their algorithms to promote discoverability of Quebec music. The motion asks that for these purposes, platforms consider Quebec as being a state. Quebec's Minister of the French Language has promised to introduce legislation to this effect. At a time when the federal government is working to implement Bill C-11, adopted last year, how do you view Quebec's desire to pass parallel legislation?
This
Senator
senator
Gold.
asks
Thank
interesting
you for the
questions
question.
regularly.
Bill C-11 is an important legislative text for the entire country. It modernizes the Broadcasting Act to bring it up to speed with the age of the Internet and to make sure that Canadian and Quebec artists can be competitive and thrive. I thank my colleague for this question, but I cannot speak on someone's desire to create legislation to this effect. So I must hesitate before speaking to that before the actual legislation has been published. Senator Miville-Deschênes, I understand your hesitation, but I will try a second time in any case. The Quebec government says it has the right to implement its own measures for cultural protection and promotion, according to the experts and the constitutionalists that it has consulted. Of course, we do not yet know if, when, or how the Quebec government will create a law. It might be an approach that is more demanding than C-11. Can you comment on this? I'm sure you'll understand that I am unable to comment on the constitutionality of any legislation that has not yet been drafted. Senator Dupuis. Thank you, Madam Speaker. The question is for Senator Gold. I have not found any specific mandate letter addressed by the Prime Minister to the new Minister of Justice named in 2023. In the mandate letter addressed to the prior Minister of Justice, it is mandated to pursue efforts to develop legislation as soon as possible to combat hate speech, including reinstating former Section 13. When will the government introduce the bill to fight hatred based on religion, gender, disability, ethnic and national origin, and various groups in our society that are subject to hateful discrimination, including on social media?
Really funny
Senator
the other day,
Gold,
this lady had
thank
an
you for
argument
that
with
very
the
important question.
Madam Speaker.
We are currently experiencing
wouldn't take being
an
cut off.
appalling situation when it comes to the rise of hate speech. The government knows it is necessary to crack down against hate speech and that there is a crying need for this. I am told that the bill is in the final stages of development and the government is hoping to introduce it soon. Senator Dupuis.
We need to
A
get
supplementary
Cled
question,
up there
Senator
again.
Gold. So in the 2021 mandate letter, reference is made to this legislation that should reflect recent consultations that were carried out in 2020. Can you tell me which governments and community organizations were consulted before the bill was drafted this time? Senator Gold. The government consulted broadly regarding online harms, and I do not have time to list all organizations, but a consultation group was created with 12 members to help draft and shape the legislation, and several dozen groups were also consulted. Senator Dagenet. Thank you, Madam
All French
Speaker.
all the time this evening, it
question
seems
is for
like.
the Leader of the
Usually they're in
Government.
English a lot.
There is
Their translators
consensus
are better, though.
that the Trudeau government is in a fiasco situation with regards to national security. Last week, we saw proof in San Francisco where the American president was able to have exchanges with the president of China. China is the second biggest economic power in the world, and Canada's failure to have a proper diplomatic relationship with China is problematic. Can you comment on this? Senator Gold. The Government of Canada and the Prime Minister are working hard to protect our interests, that is, the interests of our citizens, including the two Michaels, who are back in the news, by the way, and also Canadian citizens. Our relationship with China is complex and difficult, but the government is working bilaterally and also with our democratic allies to ensure that our national interests are well represented and to ensure that Canada remains well positioned to work together with China when there is a shared objective, for example, geopolitically, and also to defend our own democratic interests against an authoritarian country.
Stressed out today. See his hand shaking there?
The Prime Minister brags about having had exchanges with smaller Asian Pacific countries. There was a 4-hour exchange before President Biden and the Chinese president. And the Prime Minister of Canada had only less than a 1-minute exchange. China is very important, more important than just a 1-minute photo op for the future of our country. Senator Gold, the Government of Canada would never deny the size of China's economic power on the world stage. However, dear colleague, please understand that Canadian diplomacy is above all carried out behind the scenes. Senator Klein.
Senator Gold, what activities has the CRTC been actively engaged in terms of implementation and execution of Bill C-11 and promoting and growing Canadian content being consumed?
Oh, well, this is a pretty broad question.
Well, since the passage and coming into passage of Bill C-11, there are a number of initiatives that are taking place. I'm sorry, translating in my brain from French to English. Let me start again. There have been many initiatives taking place at many levels, and including by the CRTC. There were registration requirements are par for the course for matters of this kind, and there are other measures and policy directions, some of which have been in the news quite recently. Steps are being taken as part of the normal unfolding of the regulatory framework once legislation is passed to ensure that the premise and promise of C-11 to modernize our Broadcasting Act, to support Canadian content, to protect users and content creators, as has always been the intent and the fact, are well underway to being implemented.
I don't know. I don't know if I trust that, though.
I did have a supplement, but it kind of got answered there. Thank you very much.
Senator Plett.
Leader, federal court ruled last week that the NDP Liberal government's order in council to ban plastics was both unreasonable and unconstitutional. The federal court decision stated the Trudeau cabinet acted outside of their authority. This ruling was a victory for common sense, so naturally the Trudeau government is against it. Minister Guilbeault said yesterday that the Trudeau government intends to appeal. We see it with Bill C-234, and we see it here again. The Trudeau government is unable to act with common sense. Leader, how can Minister Guilbeault lecture Canadians about plastic bags or straws when he cozies up to Beijing, where they burn more coal every year than every other country on earth?
Don Plett's awesome.
Senator Gold.
Right? Don
Well,
Plett.
navigating through the different dimensions of this question
This isn't for Mark Gold,
probably
that's for
takes a
Don
little
Plett.
bit of effort. Senator, thank you for your question. Minister Guilbeault will be here tomorrow, and I'm sure you'll have I hope you will take advantage to ask him the questions that you deem most pertinent. The government has decided to appeal this decision because it remains of the view that plastic pollution is a serious problem. With the greatest respect, and I have the greatest respect for our judicial system, they don't always get it right at first instance. It's totally appropriate for the government to seek an appeal when it believes that the ravages of plastic are something that is within the government's authority to prescribe. There's a growing body of evidence that shows the serious impact on human health of the proliferation of plastic everywhere. And the government continues to believe that taking action to tackle this crisis, keeping millions of garbage bags worth of trash off of our beaches, out of our waters, and away from nature is the right thing to do.
Senator Plett.
Fortunate about the contempt you have for
plastic,
question
though.
period.
It's not
this
an
is the
easy
second
transition.
time in 2 months that the courts have found the Trudeau government has broken the Constitution. Last month, the Supreme Court said major elements of C-69, the No More Pipelines Act, were unconstitutional. Since the Supreme Court opinion was handed down about 5 weeks ago, why haven't we heard anything from the Trudeau government about repealing C-69?
What you have heard is that the government intends to introduce legislative changes to correct the infirmities that the court identified. It is passing strange, however, to hear the official opposition tout the respect for the Supreme Court, which you should have, by the way, when so many of your legislation, especially dealing with criminal justice, have been struck down as unconstitutional.
Sassy right there. He's frustrated today.
Well, our dealing with criminal justice puts criminals behind bars, not out on the streets. Leader, the Trudeau government made a deliberate choice to join the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. In doing so, your government sent $250 million Canadian tax dollars to Beijing for nothing in return. On June 14th, Minister Freeland announced a review of Canada's involvement with this bank after a Canadian who worked there revealed its deep connections to Beijing's regime. Leader, Minister Freeland said this review would be taken expeditiously. That was 5 months ago. What's taking so long, Leader? Why isn't 5 months long enough for the Trudeau government to know it should leave this bank?
It's interesting. He's got great questions today, and he's fired
Well,
up.
thank you for your question. Indeed, in the course of several years, as we know and have discussed in this chamber on many occasions, our relationships with China have changed. And China's position in the world has changed. And that has led this government to reconsider some of the assumptions that it made and previous governments made about the extent to which it would have confidence in China to be a reliable, rules-based partner. And in that regard, the review that is underway, and I have not been advised as to when the report or the conclusions of that inquiry will be released.
Was he saying that China isn't
the Prime Minister's relationship has changed too much.
Like
At a Liberal fundraiser 10 years ago, Justin Trudeau had no problem expressing his admiration for the basic dictatorship in Beijing. At the APEC summit last week, however, when he was asked if Beijing's president was a dictator, he couldn't find the answer. Leader, what's changed? Why can't he say it? Why can't the Prime Minister give a straight answer on anything?
On anything? That's a big statement.
A responsible Prime Minister has to take into account the diverse range of interests, human, economic, and geopolitical, with regard to his words. It is much easier when one is in opposition to say whatever one thinks. There are no actual consequences, but they are when the Government of Canada speaks on the world stage.
Did he just
Senator
call
Coyle.
Trudeau responsible?
Senator Gold,
I think he implied
yesterday
that.
was the Transgender Day of Remembrance, first observed in 1999 to memorialize those who've been murdered as a result of transphobia and to address serious issues of anti-trans hate and violence. 10 senators rose in this chamber last month to speak to inquiry number 5 and call on the government to fulfill its promise to develop a robust anti-hate action plan, which would combat the threats to the safety, well-being, and rights of 2S LGBTQI plus Canadians. Senator Gold, building on Senator Dupuis's question regarding anti-hate speech legislation, could you tell us when that promised anti-hate action plan will be delivered?
Senator Gold.
Anti-hate
Well, thank you for
action
the
plan
question
sounds important.
and for reminding me and Canadians of the importance of those interventions in the Senate. I have shared that with my family. It touches us personally. Government has been very clear that the stigma and discrimination that sexually diverse and gender diverse folks continue to face is unacceptable. I've been advised and informed that the government is currently working on the action plan, which is being supported by nearly $200 million in funding, and I take a personal interest in that and shall continue to pursue it.
I do believe that he takes a personal
Senator
interest
Coyle.
in
Senator Gold, thank you for that.
equality.
We know that
I
the
do believe
current
that
so-called
about Mark.
parental rights campaign focused on undermining the rights of transgender children in schools is being fueled by dangerous disinformation and the power of algorithms. Senator Gold, what is the government doing to prevent these dangerous disinformation campaigns and to protect our most vulnerable children, today being the Day of the Child?
You want to know what's
Senator
interesting, though?
Well, as
When I
we
was
know,
growing
colleagues,
up,
and thank you for the
nobody
question, the government
had
has passed
thought of
legislation to
transgender.
protect rights for transgender and gender diverse Canadians. Government has passed legislation to ban conversion therapy, and it will continue to take every action necessary to promote and protect the human rights of all Canadians, including those in the LGBTQ2 community.
Sénatrice Motion.
Senator Motion. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Senator Gold, we know that the agricultural sector is very important for Canada and that it represents a little over 10% of our GDP. We also know that the agricultural sector receives major subsidies through various programs implemented by Agriculture Canada. Could you provide us with an overview of the programs that are put in place by the federal government in order to support the Canadian agricultural sector and the amounts granted the different programs over the next years?
A ponytail is an interesting
Senator Gold,
choice
thank
for
you
a
for
senator.
the question. Producers and farmers have been for a long time responsible managers of our soil and already have adopted sustainable practices. However, the government recognizes that more support is required to reach Canada's ambitious goals and climate goals and avoid as many impacts of climate change as possible. In 2022, the government committed to spending over $1.5 billion to ensure the success and sustainability of the agricultural sector and the agricultural and agri-food sector. This affects several programs, including resilient landscape, Canadian agricultural landscapes, and several other programs. Senator Motion. Thank you, Madam Speaker. You did not mention the $3.5 billion fund that's in place for the 2023 to 2028 strategy. Could you give us a little more information on that program, which does include
The ponytail is an interesting choice for a senator.
priorities that the federal government wants to address in the coming years? Senator Gold, thank you for the question. I am not in a position to provide you with the details of these programs, but I will undertake to obtain further information, the information that you seek.
Short and sweet answer.
Leader,
Okay,
a recent
we got her
report
back.
from Global News has revealed the depth of the Iranian regime's interference in our country. ABC lawyers compiled a list of 700 IRGC agents who engaged in violent or financial crimes and now live freely here. A man whose wife and daughter were murdered on flight PS 752 says the RCMP told him they could not protect him against threats from members of the Iranian regime. The FBI warned a well-known Iranian journalist that it is not safe for her to come to Canada. Shameful. She came here anyway, which is a testament to her bravery. Leader, there can be no more excuses. Will the Trudeau government finally list the IRGC as a terrorist entity today, Leader?
What's taken them so
Senator
long with the
Gold.
IRGC? Why do you think that
No,
is? So
thank
long.
you for your question. The
So
activities
stumbles on this
of
answer.
Iran and its agents, both within its country and around the world, are cause for enormous concern. Canada has been clear and vocal and has taken concrete action to address the variety of actions that Canada considers unacceptable, the human rights violations against its citizens and especially its women, and its interference in elections and its sponsoring of terrorism, and we are witnessing the ravages of it as we speak in the Middle East. The government is satisfied that the measures that is taken are appropriate. It will always consider further measures, as it is actively doing as we speak.
Senator Platt.
I don't know what more it will take for a Trudeau government to defend our freedoms and act with common sense and criminalize the IRGC. After Hamas attacked Israel, Minister LeBlanc said he asked his security officials to update their advice about listing the IRGC as a terrorist organization. What happened after that, leader? What advice did they give?
Senator Gold.
I am not in a position, nor would I ever disclose advice that is given to ministers or that ministers have shared with me in confidence. But it is simply not the case that the government is indifferent to the actions of Iran, nefarious as they too often are, and how they have contributed to global instability and human rights abuses of the worst kind.
I didn't see
Senator
Elizabeth May.
McFedrin.
Is she here?
Thank you very much, Your Honor. My question today is directed to
no.
government leader,
Soft-spoken.
Senator Gold. I just came from 2 days of meetings with young leaders from many different parts of Canada for the first Youth Parliament Nuclear Summit. And today, presented to a number of parliamentarians, was a youth declaration with specific recommendations. And chief among those recommendations from the young leaders, both online and in person here in Senate buildings, was for Canada to send a delegation to next week's meetings at the UN headquarters in New York, the second meeting of states parties to the Treaty for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. To date, there has been no announcement. Other NATO members are sending delegations. When will Canada announce its decision?
Senator Gold.
Well, thank you for your question, which is a follow-up question to one that you've raised with me before. I don't have any further updates on the government's intentions with regard to that, but I will certainly continue to pursue it.
Senator McFedrin.
Thank you. A very brief
I do like that he says, "I don't know sometimes," or, "I can't answer that."
Parliamentarians. There are a number of parliamentarians, myself included, who have indicated to the government that we would be delighted to be official observers to this meeting, and that it does not necessarily mean that we would be delegates as part of an official Canadian delegation. I wonder if you could seek clarification on our request to be noted by the Government of Canada as observers.
Senator Gold.
I would be pleased to do so.
Senator Platt.
Leader, over the last few weeks, there have been appalling acts of violence and intimidation directed at Jews and Jewish schools, synagogues, community centres, and businesses across Canada, most particularly in Montreal, some right next door to your home, Senator Gold. I stand in unity with Jewish Canadians in this terrible moment in our history. Twice last week, Prime Minister threw blame on the Israel war on Israel for the war with Hamas. Israel's Prime Minister and their leader of the opposition both condemned his accusations. The Centre for Israel and Jewish Affairs said his rhetoric is fueling anti-Semitism here in Canada. One of his former Liberal MPs said his words could further fan the flames of Jew hatred. Where is the Prime Minister's moral compass, leader?
This will be interesting to see how Gold
First of all, I
answers
thank you for your support for the Jewish communities of Canada, of which I'm a member, and it is indeed a dark time for us. Jews do not feel safe.
When have they, though?
after
history.
the terrorist Hamas's invasion of Israel and the butchering of innocent civilians, the anti-Semitic actions have risen, not decreased.
That's not good.
The Prime Minister has been very clearly and unequivocally condemning Hamas's butchery. He has also been clear that that all civilian lives are precious and that all efforts need to be taken, as the IDF is doing, to minimize civilian casualties as it pursues its efforts in Gaza to address the threat that Hamas poses to Israel.
Senator Platt.
Michael Mostine of B'nai B'rith Canada said, and I quote, "Justin Trudeau has a duty to de-escalate the violent threats facing Canadian Jews and must not allow his government to become a primary source of inflammatory disinformation. His recent remarks failed in that regard." That's a quote, Senator Gold. Leader, where is the Prime Minister's leadership? He has none whatsoever, does he?
Whoa.
Senator Gold.
Holy cow. None
Statements
whatsoever.
which are a matter of public record strike an appropriate balance between respect for human rights and international law, brutally violated in the invasion by Hamas, and indeed in the breach of the ceasefire that had existed before Hamas invaded Israel. And his leadership remains constant as a supporter both of the rights of Israel to defend itself under international law and the rights of Palestinians to live in security, in the hope that one day a two-state solution will be within reach.
Le temps pour la période des questions est écoulé.
All right, guys.
Delayed
That,
The time for question period has expired.
that does it.
Ferry.
That's,
Senatrice
question period for the
Labucan-Benson.
night.
Senator Lebucan-Benson.
I find it super interesting
Table
here.
the
What do you
answer
think?
to the following oral questions.
It's without a lot
Response
of
to the oral
the
question asked in the Senate on
flair
December
and
13,
drama that happens in the
2022 by the
Commons,
Honourable Senator
but the
Almodvar
flow is great,
concerning
and I
aid
find
workers
you
in
learn
Afghanistan.
more about the
Response to the oral
situations when you
question
watch
in the
this.
Senate
It's
on
super
March
interesting.
29, 2023
Glad
by
that
the
we're
Honourable
covering.
Senator
We'll be trying to
Boisvenu
cover every
concerning
single one of
victims'
these.
rights.
I've got a bit of a time
Response to
management
the
issue
oral
right
question
now.
asked in the
I have
Senate
a
on May
full-time job.
4, 2023
But we're
by the
covering
Honourable
these
Senator Seaman
parliamentary
concerning the
question periods.
regulation
We're
of
doing other
vaping
videos.
fluids.
We're doing the highlights.
Response
We're
to the
doing
oral
other things
question
through the
asked in the
weekend.
Senate on
We do
June
4
20th,
shorts a day.
2023 by the Honourable Senator
covering
Platt
Canadian politics,
concerning
trying
the
to
cost
bring
of legal proceedings.
information
Response to the
and
oral
entertainment
question
to you.
asked in the Senate on June
If you have
20th,
any
2023
suggestions,
by
please
the
send them
Honourable
along.
Senator Page concerning
Any
debt
feedback,
collection.
anything at all? But for now, we're going to get going. My name is Aaron. This is Question Period
Ordre
Canada,
du
covering
jour,
Canadian
orders
politics,
of the
trying to
day.
bring information and entertainment to you, and we'll be focusing on that. Thanks a lot for watching. We're going to get running for tonight. We'll catch